Hey, it's Tom, and today we're going to talk about useContext, React hook that simplifies using context in React components. Okay, let's jump to the code. So in general, right here, we have a very simple structure. So we have a useContext component, and this component has some label here, some button, and it renders the unaware component. We have an unaware component that doesn't use this data provided by useContext component at all, and it renders aware component. Unaware component just passes the props to next component, and the aware component uses really those props to show some kind of data. So when we render that, it looks like this. So this part here, provider and increment button, are rendered through the useContext component. Next, we have unaware component, and then we have aware component, which really needs that data provided by our useContext component. So right here, we have useState. By the way, if you don't know how useState works, there should be a link somewhere here, so you can see a tutorial I prepared. And the very popular, probably the most popular way to provide data from one component to a different component within the same structure, within the same tree of components, is to just pass our props. So right here, we pass our count as a prop to unaware component, and this component doesn't really need that data. Probably it even shouldn't know about this data, but we just get the props and send them further to the aware component. And the aware component is really the one that needs that data. Of course, this architecture will work right now. Why not? We provide the props and they just go through all components. But this component also knows about this data, the count value, but it shouldn't really. It makes code more sophisticated, and there's just more space to create bugs. So there's a solution for that. We can use context. If you have used context in classes, for example, in the past, you know that we have to create a context provider, context consumer. It's not so easy, but it's still the easiest way to pass data, not through all the components in our structure, but from just one to another, even though they don't know about existence of themselves. Okay, so let's right now create a context. So we have to import the useContext hook and create context from React. And we will create counter context. Counter context, it will be React create context, and the count. Yeah, that's just the default value for this context. Okay. So right here we created the context, and right now we have to create a context provider and provide some value to this context. So what we'll need to do is to we can actually wrap everything counter context provider. Oh, sorry, it's provider, and we provide some value. So value will be equal to our count state, because we want to update it every time we update our state. Okay, so right now we are able to skip the providing props through this component, and we can simply just consume this context in aware component. So how we can do this? it's not so sophisticated. We just really need to use context and get the data. So we have const counter, and that will be equal to useContext. And what we need to provide to useContext is the object of the context itself. So counter context, and right here we can update that, and let's see if that will work. Yes, so right now we can stop using our props. We can just replace that with empty braces and right. Okay, sorry. So there are no props, and we don't want to send these props to another component. And yes, it's still working. So right now we are able to update data in useContext component and put it in our context, and then just consume this data in our aware component, which really needs that data, with skipping the unaware component. So data is not leaking anywhere. Okay, so this is it. Now you know how to use useContext and basically create a context object. That's everything I prepared for you in this tutorial. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.